When people ask me what I do for work, I I now have this tagline, and I just say, well, I help companies become fulfilling workplaces full of engaged people. And that usually sounds good and like, oh yeah, oh that sounds nice. But it's usually difficult to convey what that actually means. And my go-to strategy is to conceptualize it and explain it, and have the 9 key practices, and just try to make people understand. But I think to actually get it, it's best to hear from people who have experienced it. The following are some conversations with my dear ex-colleagues, Nicola, Mascha, Alpár, Benno, and Daniel. It's been 5 years since we worked there together, so what you'll hear is what still stayed with them until today, 5 years later. So the advantage is we definitely got rid of recency bias in their answers, so that's for sure. So anyway, without further ado, here's my dear ex-colleagues and their recollections of our shared time.
I try to think about the intense learning we had. There's a lot of stuff we read, shared with each other, a lot of experimentation, and it definitely was not a time for those that didn't like change. There was change 3 times a day or something like that. For me personally, it moved me out of my comfort zone so hard and so much that it was almost magical, I would say.
Do you want to say a bit more about how it felt for you?
Scary at times. So just because I had my traditional role, I had my responsibilities, and all of a sudden that whole thing became way more wider. I had to do, or not had to do, I had the opportunity to do things that I normally would not have done. Just not part of my role description in a classical sense. And it connected me to more people and problem spaces and general domains than a traditional setup ever could have, I would say. It kind of made it more an holistic kind of thing instead of those classical silos. All of a sudden you were looking at it from a wider perspective.
I remember that I just genuinely really wanted to go to work every day. I'm not, it's in the past, I'm romanticizing it. No, I said that back then as well. I really enjoyed coming to work every single day. I was looking forward to my job. I even remember there was one situation where you told me as part of a feedback, you're allowed to have bad days, right? I do, and I did have bad days. Everyone in their own life has bad days, but I know that I always felt good to be there. And that's probably the most significant part for me. It felt very connected. So I felt like on the one hand side, there was this massive autonomy that every one of us had, this massive freedom to bring yourself in multiple different ways. But it never felt like a solo experience. I always felt like I had everybody's support.
It was my first experience with cross-functional teams, where from sales to backend AI, computer vision, everyone was in the team. At the beginning, it was I didn't know, it was completely new for me. So I was like, what am I doing? There's so many meetings. Well, why am I involved in all these things? Just give me code to do, and I was also younger. And then slowly I was like, ooh, that's nice. I have more trust put into me, more freedom. I can learn from more experienced people or from people with other expertise, working on other domains. Can have exchange with them often and hear what they do every day and hear about their challenges, their successes. And so I got to cherish it because it's felt like being treated as an adult in a workplace, kind of.
when I joined right out of university, I was a little overwhelmed at first, I'd say, but because the people who were already there, who had gone through the same process half a year beforehand or a year beforehand, they were all very understanding and open to supporting this transition that I think everyone kind of goes through when you're becoming a self-organizing company and when you were a hierarchical company. So it was a very interesting process and stage to be part of, I would say. So taught me a lot.
And can you say a bit more? How did it feel for you?
Well, initially a little overwhelming, and it also, I think, you need to change your mindset a little bit, because when I joined right after university, it was my first job after university, and I remember sitting there, it was my first day, and I had my onboarding buddy, Alpár. And I remember that I sat there and it was like 5 o'clock came around and people started to leave, and I looked around and I was like, when is somebody going to tell me that I can go home? It's my first day. Like, I'm tired. I experienced all these new things. I learned all these new processes and faces and names. And then 5:30 came around and 6 o'clock came around, and was me the last person. And all of a sudden it hit me. I was like, no one's going to tell me to go home, because I can make that decision by myself, because I can. I'm an adult, and they trust me that I make this decision when it's ready. So, and I think that was already on the first day, kind of a little bit of the mind shift change of, this is how things go here. Like, from the very first day onward, you're given the responsibility and also the tools to make decisions. Yeah. And that was the first decision that I did by myself on my first day. It only took me like an hour or two to get there.
That is a great story. That wasn't on purpose, but I'm glad he didn't tell you.
Yeah. It was the first trial, I would say, probably.
So good.
I often look back and I'm very happy that this was my first job, and also in the way that it was structured, and in the way that the company was working together and gave me gave me space to develop professionally, but also personally. And I whenever I talk about the time, I try to stress that. So when talking with friends or someone, I try to explain that this time was also like important for me personally, because I learned a lot about myself. I mean, it's a place where you go, 8 hours a day for a full week, and you return the next week. So you interact a lot with colleagues, and those interactions also influence your daily life outside of the job.
Of course, there were also conflicts coming with more freedom. Everyone has an opinion. But for that also, there was the conflict resolution process, where we were helped with nonviolent communication, and there was coaching also by you to how to communicate and to talk directly. First, try to one-on-one with the person to figure it out, or to tell that, hey, there's an action that makes me feel like that, and I would wish to change it X, Y, Z. Yeah, and not complain to a manager that the guy sitting next to me or the girl is annoying me. So and it's like being an adult at the workplace as well. Yeah.
Was there anything that made it special for you?
The thing that I remember the most, I would say, is how it changed people and the interactions between them. When we started this whole process, one of the big issues was that people felt disengaged and detached from many of the other work that happened in the company, and people started to care more, to participate more. It became more an active participation for many people instead of just caring about your own things. People started to to take on additional responsibilities without somebody like asking for it or demanding it. It was more like, yeah, I'm willing to jump in. I have interest in that. Seeing that and how even the calmest and shyest people started to open up and take ownership and responsibility for themselves. That's definitely something that was special for me.
Was a particular role model when it comes to managing to create a team where, yeah, as I just said already, people just genuinely care about each other. They care about what they do, and they care that the person on their left, the person on their right is succeeding with them. So I think that was a big one to me, and it was also really portrayed in the support structure that was in place for us, right? So we separated kind of the reporting lines, the HR style reporting lines, and career coaching. I think this is a really good example, or that was one way in which I also felt just very supported and enabled by having a kind of a steward, as we called it, so the career coach, and that being separated from the person evaluating me. I think that's something that I hadn't seen in many companies before. And it also added this extra layer of just feeling really safe to bring up topics and feeling really safe to reflect on things and to ongoingly also talk about what I'm happy with, what I'm less happy with, where I'm challenged, in what way I'm challenged, how to overcome that. So that level of support, going way beyond evaluating my performance, that was something that was new. And the first of its kind for me at the time. Yeah, I think that was very eye-opening.
We were not siloed up. That was special for me. You are a product team, you are a market-facing team, you have all the people needed. And experiencing the first time to directly work on one thing with different specialists.
Everyone kind of needs to walk the talk, because there's a lot of things that you can have all these nice visuals and you can have your values written somewhere, but in the end it comes down to the people actually living it every day. And I had this particular experience with a different coworker where I had heard about the way that we wanted to give feedback, but then I experienced it firsthand through that coworker who was just so empathetic and understanding and just interested in my opinion when giving me feedback. And that was completely new for me, and it changed my entire view on how to give feedback and just generally my communication style up to that point. And so I think you need people who are really committed to walking the talk and investing time and teaching others in an empathetic way.
It wasn't only HR, only the people team is working on these topics, but no, the entire organization was involved in it and was shaping that company and the future of the company together.
Okay, so I think there is like the superficial answer that I also, so there's a thing that I would tell my parents or my friends is that like, I don't have a boss. And with this simple sentence, I sometimes try to capture what it meant to work there. So that I think one of the most amazing things were that even while being a junior developer there, a lot of trust was put into me, and I had a lot of freedom to participate, to do things, to experiment, to bring my own opinion. It was basically valued as much as other people's opinion. And of course, some people would drive discussions more than others, and sometimes you would sit back and listen more than actively engage. But I always thought the most amazing thing is that I could, if I wanted, just step in front of the whole company and voice concerns or something like that.
Is there anything, if at all, that still influences you today in terms of, how you show up at work and how you see work?
There's like two things that definitely made it into my day-to-day life. the idea that decisions should happen where the actual knowledge is and where the work is, and not somewhere else. That's something that is really becoming part of my toolbox. I cannot imagine to do it any other way, to be honest. So that's probably the most impactful. And something that was just part of, I would say, culture at the time very strongly was the focus on people. Like assuming good intent and stuff like that, these kind of buzzwords. That was just something that changed my perspective. I started to look different at people, and what they need to grow, what they want, and how the system can support them in these endeavors.
Yes, yeah, 100%. Especially lots of experience, but especially I would say this feedback experience, because this had such a profound effect on my overall communication style. And it's very, I think in this situation, it would have been very easy for him because he wanted to give me feedback on something a passive aggressive message that I've sent. And it would have been very easy for him to do it like this, like you, like, don't you do that? But instead he did it in the most curious, understanding way, which if he had done it any different way, I think it would have put me in a situation where I would have wanted to defend myself. And instead I was able to open up, and I was able to reflect also more on all the other times that I had given feedback, all the other times that I communicated, not just in a professional context, but in a personal context. And that was painful to reflect. That was super painful to reflect. And it was very important. And I think it profoundly changed the way that I communicate with coworkers, with my partner, with family, siblings, which is always a tough one, to change your communication style with your siblings, but it has done that.
For me, it's become a habit to, whenever I join a company, I create a roadmap for that company. And in my position as head of people, that roadmap is always structured according to the drivers of intrinsic motivation. So if you look at my roadmaps today, it's still mastery, autonomy, purpose, and belonging. And then all the initiatives and the changes and the implementations that I believe will maximize those factors. So in that sense, I think I've taken it like a textbook and I'm still applying it because so far it's serving me. And so far it seems to be serving the people that I'm working with.
What do you think was the secret sauce that made it work there, and maybe not to the same extent in different environments that you have experienced?
That's a good question. What was the secret sauce? The easiest thing to say would be the people. But if you look at the people at the time, you probably wouldn't have guessed how the whole thing turned out. So I would say it was the willingness of all the employees to move out of the comfort zone. But the most important thing for me was that we had the backing, especially from the leadership team. I think if we didn't have the buy-in to have all these iterations, these failures, adjustments, retries, positive outcomes and negative ones, and just the willingness to try one more time. I think if we didn't have that, it would have been very hard. Besides that, I would say the desire for people to learn and become better and to address the problems we had at the time. There was a shared understanding, it's not great the way it is, let's do something about that. And that was a shared understanding, and I think this kind of unlocked it.
I was hoping you would give me a new secret sauce. It's like, oh no, it was actually this.
Yeah, and we hired somebody, a weird guy.
Yeah.
I think that it has a lot to do with intention and coming from the right place. So maybe a company B might try to implement new work practices because it's hot at the moment. It's what people are looking for, right? But it doesn't work if you do it for the employer brand, for example. I think what really was at the heart of it was that it was a very, very well-informed, conscious decision if you don't have the buy-in of the leaders in the organization, I think then it will not work. The second aspect, and might or might not be biased by the fact that I was working in hiring, but I think bringing in the right people that also really can buy into that themselves, and that also share the vision and share the skills. I do believe it also takes skills to thrive in such an organization. And when I think back, I at least feel like we had a hiring process that was also optimized for really identifying the people who share the same values, who also had the self-efficacy, I would say, and the ability to turn that autonomy, that freedom that comes with new work type of organizations, and to turn that into something valuable and, come in with that level of drive and proactivity on their end as well. And of course, you want to sell that you have this type of organization. You want to sell that it's extremely cool and it comes with so many opportunities. But at the same time, also having the transparency and talking about the challenges that come with it openly. I think that also contributes to people making informed choices.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think the worst thing you could do is portraying a different image, and then people come in and they are either disappointed or overwhelmed, and then just 3 months later leave again and you start over. That's the worst.
Exactly, yeah. And I think that also, maybe that goes also a bit into all the questions. Like, I remember we were always talking about, why would you bring in great people and then not treat them as adults? And I think this level of transparency, starting in the hiring process, but also continuing along the collaboration, along the employment, is also something that was really necessary on both sides to make things happen and to have the structure work. But at the same time, I think accountability is also a big thing. So this balanced field of how can you maximize autonomy so that the people that you bring in can bring in their skills to the fullest and really help achieve great things within the organization. How do you link that with accountability? That's just one example of how I feel like new work type of companies have their own challenges. I still think those challenges are more fun and more interesting than the traditional challenges that companies have. But we talked about transparency, right? And this was, for example, something when people ask me also in interview processes about, okay, what do I have to be prepared for? Like, what could be the challenges that I will face? It's also, you have a big impact. You have a lot of autonomy to make choices within this organization, but you also have to come in on your part, be prepared for it, and also take responsibility and take accountability for those things that you're starting and follow through. I think that's probably a higher demand on the individual than in companies where that is coordinated, by a manager, a team lead, or a boss, or whatever we want to call it.
There was a vision behind it, or a wish, a desire that, hey, this is something that we spend so much time, the company spends so much time to hire people, to hire the right people, smart people, active people. And that's also treat them like that and give them the ability to solve the problems they see with help, but essentially by themselves, to elect or to allow them to form in a way that fits best the problem.
It needs to be carried, I would say, by overall all people, but most importantly by the ones who initially make this decision to either go fully self-organized or to use some principles or some methods. So I would say that it needs to start with the C-level, and depending on the size of the company, if you have a middle management, definitely them as well, because I think in some cases, maybe not all, but in some cases, it's people who have earned their way into middle management. So it might be very difficult for them to give up the quote unquote power of making decisions. And then I think, especially if you really want to go fully self-organized, it's a consistency thing, like to consistently go back to the purpose of why you decided to do this, because it's easy to do it when things are easy. And it's a lot more difficult to stick to it when things are difficult. And one example here I can think of is it's difficult to get people. I mean, the recruiting market is anyways, it's difficult to get people who have the right skill set, but then on top of that, to have people who have the right mindset for the organizational culture that you've created. And I think here, sometimes it's very easy to then neglect the cultural part a little bit, the mindset part a little bit, because you're so focused on, but the skill set, and we really need someone in this position. The mindset part, the cultural part, maybe it won't be that difficult. And I feel like when you're not consistent also in this decision making into only bringing in the people who have the right mindset, who are willing to learn it, then you're compromising everything that you've built, or potentially compromising everything you've built.
What makes it work, or what's at least necessary, is that you agree on some common goals, and you hear everybody on that. And with this in mind, or actually, I think you need to put it first. So you agree on something, and on a way to work together, for example. And if all people involved believe that it's a good thing, and we need to strive for it, even if we don't achieve it sometimes. If we want to strive for it, then finally, this is what you need. So you'll remind each other over and over again of some of the details, because they might get lost in daily life. But since you have it at the back of your head, or I don't know, written out somewhere, some of the aspects, I think that just coming back to it constantly, or not constantly, but from time to time, helps you like on the journey to like the place where you want to go.
To see the bigger picture, remind you,
Yeah,
this is why we're doing this, even though it might be a struggle from time to time.
Yeah. So I think it's important to keep the bigger picture in mind.
Let's assume I had a time machine.
Yeah.
And we can go back to that time. Would you want to be part of that journey again?
Is that really a question? I would definitely want to be a part of that again. Like, I feel like I'm almost annoying sometimes, because as you said, it's years later, and my family, my friends, they still have to hear about it every now and then. When I'm facing a new challenge in my work today, I'm like, oh, we did this cool thing. Maybe I have to think about if that could work here, or something similar, something inspired by that. So it's still very much present in my head. I'm still annoying the rest of the world with all those ideas. So in that sense, it was one of the best decisions that I could make at the time, and I would make it again,
100%. I'd say it would be good if I had some of the learnings I had today and I could bring them with me. But even if I couldn't, I definitely do it. I mean, there was so much to learn in these years. There was so much to try out, stuff that I probably would have never, ever even be exposed to in a normal setup. The personal growth that I had in these times, there's no doubt. If you have that machine, like definitely the co-pilot seat I'm in, don't even flinch.
Yeah. Yeah, because at first I didn't know what is this, and then now knowing, yes. It was a very special time and a very special investment as well.
Yes. Who wouldn't want to be? No, I think that would be amazing. I would want to be in that time machine, because I also think. So I tried to hint at that before. I think it's a journey. It's a learning experience, or some other buzzword. But I really believe that. So I think there's many things still that I could learn and experience, even like see for myself, feel, and so that's why I would definitely join you.
Yes, absolutely. I asked myself a question many times, because I also, coming from the psychology area, I had a lot of people that I studied with that went into different HR functions as well at various different companies, different sizes, different backgrounds. And when I compare the experiences, I had the ability to truly add value from the very first day onwards. And I never felt like I was too young, or maybe because I didn't have enough experience, or maybe because I was a woman or anything like that. I never had the experience that just because of that I couldn't add to something. It was more like, you have a perspective, we have a perspective, let's bring it together, let's make the best thing happen, and let's exchange. And also the fact that I learned so much in terms of like my technical skills, but then also my people skills. I think that has been an invaluable experience. And also when I look at my past experiences at the other companies I then joined, I feel like it was always a little bit of a USP for me to have this knowledge, because it's still not that common, I would say, to have come from a self-organizing company. And I think even if the companies didn't want to go fully self-organized, they saw the advantage of me being able to apply certain tools, certain knowledge, to create engagement within the organization.
So any advice that you would give yourself starting over? So let's say you go back on the time machine, and once you're back, you know all the memories of the future are erased. You actually have to start over, but you can send yourself a letter with you. Not much can go on it, but you can write one letter. What would be on it?
It would first say, on your first day, go home when you want to go home. That's the first thing. And then I would say, ask a lot of questions, ask more questions than maybe I did back then, and observe a lot and learn a lot. Because I would say that in the beginning, especially when you don't have that much previous work experience, I think you have an idea of how things work and how they're supposed to be, because university, I think, still very much teaches these things, or also at previous internships, that's what was taught. And I would say be open to self-reflect a lot, be open to challenge your own beliefs, be curious, and have a lot of fun, which I did have a lot of fun.
Be curious. Be curious about this. I would also add one thing to it, that this will give you more power. So I would like, this will give you more power. And so knowing that, I would have used it as like more motivation to take advantage of this and be more proactive in shaping this.
I sometimes look back and I'm amazed how many things like sparked interest, or how many ways of thinking for me I started back then, in terms of approaching relationships, but also, I don't know, approaching work, so professional problems. And I guess if I could send back a note with like, hey, this is really valuable, try to dig deeper into, I don't know, ask Manuel more questions.
So I think in general, right, like organization and prioritization in a company where you have so much freedom, this is something to really also keep the eye on, to make sure that you are really prioritizing your day, that you use that freedom in a structured way still. And that's something that I would do even more the second time around.
Be brave, even braver than you were. Experiment a lot more. Try even crazier things, and keep an eye on the business side. I think we had a strong focus on people and the culture setup, and I think we also had to keep an eye out for the business and make that work as well. Besides that, all the failures we made brought us to the end result we had, so I wouldn't take those away. I just say try even more, be even crazier.
So you wouldn't want to prevent anything that happened by sending yourself and I was like, oh, don't do this. That won't work.
No, I wouldn't. I mean, this is part of the learning journey, and if you take some of that out, even the maybe unpleasant things, you don't get the same or maybe even worse results. So no, I wouldn't. I had a good time.
Yeah, it makes total sense to me, because I agree that you can't get to the same state without making the learning yourself, right? So it's what I also keep telling people, like, even if I could travel to the future and I give you exactly the setup that you will have in 3 years' time and I present it to you, you won't get there because you have to get there yourself.
Yeah.
It's also important to understand that we developed this together, and I think that's also a very good aspect of it, is because many people were involved. So it's not something that is, I don't know, just developed on a piece of paper, but in practice. So you have to make it yours, like whatever it is you want to implement. So you have to make it yours and adapt.
I think that what I've learned in that year, but then also the years afterwards, has had such a profound effect, and I see myself carrying it into the companies I joined ever since. And I think it's such a cool, from what I've heard also from others who then left, who joined other companies, they kind of carry this knowledge with them as well. And I think it's such a little bit like the butterfly effect. Like, we did something in this very small company in Munich with all these extraordinary people, and then they went on and help other companies be maybe slightly better in this one regard, slightly more people focused on in this other regard. So this, I think, no matter how small the change, I think if enough people do it, if enough people are committed to it, it can carry big impact later down. And it's great to see that. I feel like a lot of people carry on kind of that legacy.
It's also good to stay realistic and to be aware that just that it's a lot of fun and that in my personal ideal world, it is the better way to work, doesn't mean that it's the easier way to work.
I'd say I oftentimes wake up and miss those times, because like not every other company approaches it in the similar sense. And even if we moved on the scale, I would say rather far to the new work side of things, I think this is the way work should be. This is how I felt the most engaged, how I felt the most energetic, how it was just great to work. Not just that the overall work was great, the people and just sharing that with others made us happy and successful. And I think that's what in the end it's about. It wasn't just work. It was more than that.
Okay, so that's all the interviews. I now feel the warm fuzzies. I feel immensely grateful and happy about what we got to create together, and that it still impacts people's lives to this day, in their personal life and into other companies they joined thereafter. As Nicola said, the ripple effects go way beyond, and that is really more than I could have hoped for. What they said gave me goosebumps at times, and it makes me feel immensely fulfilled and honored that I got to take them on this journey, and that it still impacts them today. If what you heard resonates with you, please do check out my website at newworkbydesign.com. There you'll find workshops and a leadership program, and most of all, an online course where I really try to distill down the key practices that make all this happen, what you just heard, to hopefully make the journey, if you choose to go on it, a bit more straightforward for you than it was for us at the time. So please do take our learnings, and even though you have to learn the lessons yourself, it will give you a platform to hit the ground running. That's all. Thank you very much. I'm Manuel from New Work by Design. If you feel compelled, please do reach out. I would love to hear from you.